No way. The Tristan Jarry of old is back as Sidney Crosby breaks even more records regardless of how many games the Penguins lose. Juno Koppanen got his first NHL goal, which brings the Penguins closer to a rare feat. And Mike Sullivan spoke out about another third period collapse, something we have seen far too often over the last few seasons. This team taking its foot off the gas pedal after two periods of leading, and they lose another game after being up 2-0 on the New York Islanders, following a barrage of 4 straight goals by the Isles in the third period, handing the Penguins a heartbreaking loss. We're to break down a lot here on this episode of Penguins Digest today, but before I get into it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Penguins Digest, we're providing the latest Pittsburgh Penguins news, rumors, updates, and analysis here on the channel. And today we're going to start it off with a heartbreaking loss to the New York Islanders, essentially taking the Penguins out of playoff contention. We had our breaths held and we had our hopes up that this team could maybe make the playoffs this season, but it is not happening. We officially have a 0% chance after having a 0.2% chance before the loss to the Islanders. Penguins captain Sidney Crosby and head coach Mike Sullivan both had a little bit to say following this heartbreaking loss to the New York Islanders. Sidney Crosby started off by saying, "We just beat ourselves. We made some mistakes, obviously. They're going to push, but there just wasn't a lot of push back." By us is what he's referring to. The Penguins didn't push back when the Islanders made their push. They just kind of laid off the gas pedal, and they ended up conceding the victory to the New York Islanders. If we were tanking, that's one thing, but we were on a 4-game winning streak. So this loss stings just a little bit more for the Penguins, losing to their division rival, the New York Islanders, in a way like this. And Mike Sullivan said they get a goal on the first shift of the third period, which is not a great time to give up a goal. They win the faceoff at center ice, and it turns into a 2-on-0 the other way. That was him referring to the beginning of the third period, and then he talked about the collapse. It's just playing a game with not a whole lot of purpose. So we give up an easy goal to start the third period, and it gives them life. It gives them juice. And it's still a 2-1 game. We still have a lead. We've got to respond. We've got to respond and play the right way, and we didn't. We gave up odd man rushes. We didn't stay on the right side of people. We weren't physical enough in all 3 zones. We didn't close on people in the defensive zone. We just didn't play hard enough. And that has been a theme for this Penguins team for the last few seasons. And there's this stereotype around Mike Sullivan teams that they give up in the third period. They sit on leads, and they give up these goals that they shouldn't give up, and then the life just gets sucked out of them. And I understand as a former player that happens sometimes, but this team has been very bad at it. When they do it, it's obvious that they're just kind of laying off the gas and they're just content. Okay, we have a 2-goal lead. Let's just sit back. And Mike Sullivan said it perfectly. I mean, there was a lot of things that they could have done better when they were up 2-0. And even after the Islanders scored, they could have responded, and they didn't. So let's look at some takeaways from the game overall. 3 takeaways from this brutal loss to the Islanders, according to the Hockey News. And the first one was the honeymoon is over. And that was because Tristan Jarry was playing lights out for the Penguins. We seemed unstoppable. We seemed like we could beat pretty much anybody the way Tristan Jarry was playing. And for 2 periods, he was still standing on his head. He had 20-plus saves in the first 2 periods. And then in the third period, Tristan Jarry looked like Tristan Jarry again. So we got this version of Tristan Jarry. We got to see flashes of what it could be, and other teams got to see flashes of what he could be, but there's no consistency. We got 4 games, 4 good games out of him, 4.5, 4 2/3 if you want to be very precise, and then the third period, you just can't have that. Jarry has not looked better in the past 4 games, playing arguably his best hockey of the season, but that sloppy third period will likely lead to Alex Nedeljkovic getting the nod against the Blue Jackets on Friday night. It's only Wednesday, guys, so Friday night is coming up, another home game against the Blue Jackets, and then more on Jarry. Whether it was a rebound, an undefended player, or something else, Jarry looked like the Jarry of old in the third. He got beat by a wrist shot, kicked out a rebound for the game-tying goal, and on the first shot of the third period, he gave up a goal with a bounce off his back. So some Pittsburgh Penguins goaltending woes that we have experienced all season long. He didn't give up a goal in the first shot of the first period of the game, but in the third period, it did not go well for the Penguins. An early strike by the Islanders, and then just continued momentum from there. Jarry's inability to make the save at the start of the period led to a sequence of events that cost the Penguins the lead and ultimately cost them the game. So the Penguins' 4-game winning streak is over, and they showed their true colors in that game against the Islanders. Another thing that we want to talk about as a takeaway is Crosby continues his quest, and a different quest than what we're going to talk about later in the show, but his quest to another point per game season is what this is referring to. Crosby scored a first period goal to run his season total up to 74 points, putting him 6 away from 80, which would give him a point per game average this season, breaking Wayne Gretzky's record of 19 years. That is a heck of a record to break. Consistency, a model of consistency is Sidney Crosby. The final takeaway from the game was just mistakes. Mistakes, and repeated turnovers, sloppy play by the Pittsburgh Penguins. They gave up that first goal in the third period, and then they couldn't make good passes. They couldn't get quality shots on goal or disrupt the Islanders' momentum. They just let them run us over. And just like Jarry for 40 minutes, the Penguins hit all the right notes and got by. But once that first goal went in, everything unraveled. And by the final buzzer, the home team looked like a shell of themselves, based on what we saw in the first 2 periods. So the Penguins, another loss. We hadn't lost in a little while, so we're starting to look good here in the month of March. And since the trade deadline, this team was starting to look a little bit better. And now all of a sudden, all hope is lost. We have less than a month left in the regular season, ladies and gentlemen. So, we got to talk about draft odds at this point. So we're going to later in the show. But first, I want to mention the legend continues. And that is what the Pittsburgh Penguins put on social media for Sidney Crosby when he did what he did last night, scoring a goal to get the second goal of the game for the Pittsburgh Penguins against the New York Islanders. He is breaking records like nobody's business, and that is why the legend continues, because now with that goal, he is moving up on the all-time list of points scored for one franchise. We've been monitoring that, and we've been following how close he's getting to Gordie Howe, who is the top dog on that leaderboard. But Sidney Crosby got a historic announcement from the Pittsburgh Penguins on social media after that goal, because he surpassed Wayne Gretzky on that list, getting closer and closer to Mario Lemieux. He's only 53 points behind Mario Lemieux, and Crosby just continuing to be the greatest player that we've seen since Mario Lemieux. Crosby entered the night with 1,669 career points, and with that goal, he passed Wayne Gretzky for 4th most points with a single franchise in league history, 1,670. Holy. And the legend continues is what Pittsburgh wrote. Crosby surpasses Gretzky for 4th on the all-time list for points with a single franchise. And here is really the best meme that I've seen. It's not really a meme because Sidney Crosby is not human. And I'm convinced. I mean, since I started watching him back in 2007, Sidney Crosby is not human. And yeah, lasers out of his eyes. He can fly. He's invincible. Whatever it is, Sidney Crosby is a superhero and continuing to show us that he is one of the greatest hockey players ever on planet Earth. And hey, that's all you can really say about Sid at this point. I mean, what haven't we seen from Sidney Crosby? We've seen it all, or at least we think we've seen it all. And then we'll probably see something else that we've never seen before. Guy might play till he's 45. We don't know. We hope it's in a Penguins uniform. But let's get on to the next task today, and that's talking about the draft odds, because obviously we can talk about Crosby all day and how great he is, but the reality of the situation is this team is in a very tough spot. So we got to talk about the draft odds because, hey, we're chasing that number 1 pick, and this 4-game winning streak did not help our opportunity to get that number 1 pick in the draft for 2026. And right now, I'm going to show you where we stand, because this is an important thing to cover on this channel. Obviously, we're looking towards that number 1 pick, knowing that we probably wouldn't get the number 1 pick, but it is a draft lottery. So we do have chances of getting that number 1 pick as long as we don't make the playoffs, and the worse we finish, the better chance of winning the lottery. You saw what the Devils did. They weren't the worst team in the league when they got Jack Hughes, when they got Nico Hischier. Hey, maybe we can get the number 1 pick in the next 2 drafts for the lottery and turn our franchise around in 2 seasons. I mean, it's very possible. It has been done. Penguins did it way back when. Marc-Andre Fleury was the 1st overall pick in the draft. Sidney Crosby was the 1st overall pick in the draft. Malkin was the 2nd overall pick in the draft. We could get a couple of good draft picks back to back. Hey, and with Sergei Murashov, who knows? We have our franchise goalie, so we get a defenseman and a forward and the number 1 pick. You never know. I mean, that's a Rasmus Dahlin and a Jack Eichel. Look to the Buffalo Sabres and how they got the number 1 pick a couple different times. They picked Eichel 2nd overall, but that's still, that's my point. The Oilers, they get Connor McDavid 1st overall, and then they get Leon Draisaitl with a top 3 pick. That happens, guys. So if you get a couple of really good picks back to back to back, you can really turn around your franchise and in due time. I mean, it happens so quickly when you get these higher draft picks, you get these better players, and that's something that we're going to continue to follow as the season continues. The Penguins had a 0.2% chance to make the playoffs, so that miracle dissipated when the Penguins got to 0.00 according to Money Puck and their playoff odds model after the loss to the Islanders. And again, the Crosby quote about just beating ourselves, making some mistakes. The next up on the list will be the Anaheim Ducks, who are at 0.1% currently to make the playoffs, and the Boston Bruins at a whopping 0.9% chance of making the playoffs after falling 4 points out, having played 2 extra games compared to everybody else. And despite the 4-game winning streak in the rearview mirror, the Penguins are 5-4-1 in their last 10, and now they join the club of 0% chance, 0.0% cast-offs, according to Money Puck. The Flyers just hit that over the weekend, and the Sabres were the first team and the only team in the Eastern Conference to hit that mark before the Flyers and the Penguins. So, hey, we're joining a dreaded club, but it's a club trying to attack that number 1 pick in the draft. So the first overall pick, it's not quite the same as the NHL odds, but the Money Puck projections for the first overall pick are something to look at, because the Penguins have risen to a 7.1% chance of the first overall selection. And that might be a lucky number, 7.1, 71, Evgeni Malkin, you never know. He wasn't the first overall pick. Again, I'll tell you, he was second overall, but a lucky number nevertheless. Presumably Matthew Schaefer, a defenseman playing for the Erie Otters, Connor McDavid's old team. Hey, maybe that's who we get with the first overall pick if we can win this draft lottery. Seattle has a 7.1% chance as well. Flyers, 8.6%. San Jose and Chicago have the highest odds, 22.4% and 16.5% respectively. So something to keep an eye on. We'll continue to update you about the draft odds as the season progresses, and if the Penguins get closer to that number 1 pick. Let's talk about a rare feat that the Penguins are close to reaching, a rare feat within reach that the Penguins could actually accomplish this season, something that you could spin this season into a positive on. Sidney Crosby, obviously something that's been a positive all season long, but this is a very unique stat that not a lot of teams have been able to say they could accomplish, because it's actually something crazy. The Penguins could achieve a feat that they've only done one other time in the Sidney Crosby era, and that is having 30 different players score a goal for your team in a single season. The Penguins, with Juno Kopanen's first goal of the season and first goal for the Penguins this season, he became their 28th player to score a goal for the Pittsburgh Penguins this season, joining goaltender Alex Nedeljkovic, who also lit the lamp at one point. So we have 28 now, and only 10 times have the Penguins had 29 different goal scorers. So even then we would be joining an exclusive club, but only 6 times did they reach 30 or more. So no matter how many goal scorers we get the remainder of the 2024-25 season, it's safe to say that no lineup will get close to matching the 88 team, which had 35 different goal scorers led by Mario Lemieux and his 70 goals. So the Penguins chasing that 35, also chasing that 33. They did 31 twice, 30 twice. We could get to 30. You never know. We did it in 2020. That was the only time in the Sidney Crosby era that we reached 30 different goal scorers in a single season, and we're close. We're at 28. So that's something to also keep an eye on. A positive for this season is how many guys have scored goals for this Penguins team, and that's cool. It's always nice to see it distributed equally and not just guys accounting for all the goals. It's nice to see young players getting an opportunity and scoring, like Kopanen, a defenseman pitching in, a goaltender pitching in. Hey, that's a team sport. That's teamwork. Teamwork making the dream work, and the dream's still alive, trying to get to 30 goal scorers, different, unique goal scorers on the season. So, hey, that's this episode of Penguins Digest. It's been a kind of depressing episode, but also we have a little bit of a positive spin on it with Sidney Crosby and the unique goal scorer stat that maybe some people aren't aware of. So thank you guys for watching this episode of Penguins Digest. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we will see you on the next episode.